What's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to another video, and today, if I don't knock over my tripod, I have a deck profile for y'all today. It is my Swordsoul deck profile. This is a deck I've been wanting to revisit for a while, so let's get right on into the list. I'm going to skip over a few things. One thing I'm not going to skip over is we are 16 subscribers away from 200. If we could please get me to 200 by the end of the year, which I know is a couple short weeks away, I would greatly appreciate it. Like I said, I'm going to skip over a few things and get straight into the deck profile, starting us off with 3 copies of Swordsoul Moye. If my girl and Moye are drowning. If y'all don't, So I'm going to go over the Swordsoul effects, just very briefly, kind of summarize them. So Moye, when normal or special, you reveal a worm, summon a Swordsoul token. All of the Swordsoul monsters have effects based around summoning these Swordsoul tokens, and they're all level 4 tuner tokens that are water. And then Moye, if used as synchro material, lets you draw a card. You can only use each effect of Moye as once per turn. Then I'm on 3 copies of Swordsoul Long One. You can discard a Swordsoul or Worm monster. Moye says Swordsoul or Worm monster. Swordsoul card or a Worm monster to do its effect. And all of them say that, so you can discard a Swordsoul card or a Worm monster to special summon Long One from your hand. And when you special summon him this way, you can special summon a Swordsoul token. Whenever Long One is used as synchro material, you can burn your opponent for 1,200 points. Which comes up in time. Because, time is a thing right now. Because combo format. Next, I'm on 2 copies of Swordsoul of Taya. One thing I learned from the last time I did a deck profile for Swordsoul is 1 Taya isn't enough, especially in the main. So I bumped Taya up to 2 in the main, and I'm going to spoil something for later in the video. I am playing the 3rd one in the side. Taya has a really, really good effect, and its effect is it can banish a Swordsoul card or Worm monster out of your graveyard to summon a Swordsoul token. It's not a non-summon effect, it's just whenever you want to. And then if it's used as synchro material, oh, would you look at that, you get to Foolish Burial a Worm from your deck. Really cool things that come up with this card, and I've done a lot of testing with this deck off camera. And if you guys want to see combo tutorials, you guys will have to give me a little bit because I'm recording this before going on a vacation. Like we're leaving later tonight when I get off of work, so that's why I'm trying to blaze through this. So after Taya, we're on 3 copies of Incredible Ecclesia the Virtuous. She's just 3 extra copies of any of your Swordsoul monsters. She can special summon herself. She has a special summoning condition, right? Yeah, if your opponent controls more monsters than you do, you can special summon her. And then you can tribute her off as a quick effect to special summon any of your Swordsoul monsters from your deck. And that is it for the Swordsoul monsters. Moving on to the Swordsoul spells and trap. We've got 3 copies of Swordsoul Emergence. Emergence is just another 3 copies of all your Swordsoul names. Unfortunately, Emergence cannot grab the Ecclesia, but you basically have 6 extra copies of Taya, 6 extra copies of Long One, and 6 extra copies of Moye. So, very consistent there. And then we're on 1 copy of Swordsoul Blackout. And I only am playing the 1 copy of Blackout. I'm not playing a 2nd copy in the side. But if you wanted to play a 2nd copy of Blackout in the side deck, there's a card that's very easily interchangeable there. And let me tell you guys, we're not even halfway done with this deck profile. And this is it for the Swordsoul cards that we are playing. That is because we are playing multiple engines. But one of the first ones we're going to talk about is one that was in my previous profile, which is the Tenyis. We're on 3 copies of Ashuna, which if you guys don't know, all of the Tenyi monsters say if you control no monsters or only control non-effect monsters, you can special summon them from your hand, and then they have graveyard effects that are unique to each one. where they banish themselves, or where if you control a non-effect monster, not if all monsters you control are non-effect monsters, you get to do something. And Ashina summons another Tenyi from the deck. And we are also on 2 copies of Adhara, which can banish itself to add a banished worm monster back to your hand by banishing itself. And then we have 2 copies of Vishuddha, which is to help us break boards, because it can banish itself to bounce a card your opponent controls back to the hand. And then I'm also on the 1 copy of Shatana. Shatana comes up a lot more often than I think it does, which is why I'm only on the 2 Adhara. But if you were going to cut the Shatana, I highly recommend against doing that, because there's cards that I'm playing that like the Shatana. I would play a third Adhara over a third Vishuddha, because Vishuddha is only good in a board breaking scenario, which typically when you're breaking a board, you're going for game that turn. So I like playing the Shatana, which is whenever your opponent destroys a non-effect monster by battle, you can banish Shatana, summon back one of the monsters destroyed, and then destroy a monster or a card that your opponent controls. And then I'm also on 2 copies of Heavenly Dragon Circle. I think I was I think I was on 3 of this in my last profile, but I've gone down to 2 because it's just 2 extra copies of all of these, which is really more than enough. Moving on to the first new addition to my Swordsoul list is a Zing package. So I'm pretty sure you guys can guess a couple of cards that are going, or a card that's going to be in the extra deck. Starting us off, we have 1 copy of Jiao Tu, 1 copy of Qi Wen, and 1 copy of 9 Pillars of the Yang Zing. I'm gonna be honest with y'all. I saw a list that topped in a Latin America region YCS, and they played these exact Yang Zing cards, and I understand why. It's because of the floating that these cards do, and it's really great. So typically what you're doing is with a certain synchro monster in the extra deck, you're searching out 9 pillars, and then you can use 9 pillars to get rid of that synchro monster to for a negate, to then summon Qi Wen, and then and then if your opponent destroys the Qi Wen, you get the Jiao Tu. But if you have to go through the synchro monster that we're talking about, you still summon the Qi Wen, because Qi Wen doesn't specify a battle position, whereas a Jiao Tu specifies battle position, and Jiao Tu is a 2k defense wall, so not that easy to out, and that is going to be it for the Yang Zings. Now for the next package, which is another new addition. This is a 45 card list, if you guys are keeping count. The next engine we are on is Superheavy Samurais. So we're on 3 copies of Superheavy Samurai Wakaushi, 3 copies of Superheavy Samurai Motorbike, 1 copy of Superheavy Samurai Big Brick Benkai, and 1 copy of Superheavy Samurai Soul Horns. The reason why I say Benkei is a brick is because if you hard draw it, your entire engine is just kind of null and void, and you just lose a turn on, or you just lose this engine and you lose access to a couple of things, but nothing too extraneous in a sense. So, starting us off with Wakaushi. Wakaushi has a scale effect to scale another Superheavy Samurai scale monster from your deck, and then special summon itself, which is where the Benkei comes into play, because Benkei searches a Superheavy Samurai Soul card, which is where Soul Horns comes in, and then Horns can equip itself to Wakaushi from the hand, and then special summon itself, and boom, you have a free level 5 synchro. You could also trim the fat a little bit and get rid of the Yang Zing package, get rid of 2 copies of Wakaushi, and change this out for a copy of Superheavy Samurai Soul Booster Gaia, in order to 1-card Baron without using, what's his name? Longwan. And you can use Longwan for other things like Evil Longwan in the extra deck, Cheng Ying, and so on. And then Motorbike is just 3 extra copies of Wakaushi, which is why I was saying you could drop 2 copies of Wakaushi in the entire Yang Zing package, and drop a specific boy in the extra deck to play the Soul Booster Gaia for Baron, because instead of playing the card I'm referencing, a lot of people already know what it is by now. Instead of playing that, you could be playing the Stardust Excel Synchron card. If you have the money for it, kudos to you, but I would save that for a different deck that could utilize it better. So that's really kind of it for the Superheavy Samurais. Now we move on to the hand traps and anti-hand trap kind of stuff. So starting us off, we're on 3 copies of Ash Blossom Enjoy Spring, 3 copies of Effect Veiler, 2 copies of Crossout Designator, and 1 copy of Called by the Grave. The reason why I'm on Veiler and not Imperm is because Veiler synergizes with Superheavy Samurais, because Wakaushi requires you to have no spells and traps in the graveyard, Benkei requires you to have no spells and traps in the graveyard, Soul Horns requires you to have no spell traps in the graveyard. So Veiler is a better turn 0 than Imperm in this case, because it keeps one of your engines alive, and your engine can also be Ash Bait, which is really nice to have. And then I'm on the Crossout Called By combo for anybody that is also playing Veiler Ash. If you wanted to make these 3 other hand traps, you definitely could. You can make it Nibiru, you can make it Phantasme, you can make it whatever you want. And that is it for the main deck. So let's start us off with the extra deck. Starting us off in the extra deck with our Swordsoul Synchros. We have 2 copies of Swordsoul Grandmaster Chixiao. Chixiao on Synchro Summon searches for a Chixiao on summon either searches or banishes a Swordsoul card from your deck, and then it is a quick effect to banish a worm monster or a Swordsoul card from your graveyard. Target a monster on the field and negate its effects until the end of the turn. So it's a monster negate, which is really, really good in being able to search. You can only use one of its effects in a turn, so if you Synchro Summon it, you can't also use its negate in the same turn. Then we're on 1 copy of Cheng Ying. I've thought about going up to 2 Cheng Ying and cutting out Evil Longwan. I think it's like Kiching Longwan. I don't know. I don't want to sound like offensive. But I'm on 1 Cheng Ying, but if you don't want to play the Longwan in the extra deck, you could play a second Cheng Ying. And what do Cheng Ying? Well, he gains 100 attack and defense for each banished card from both players, and your opponent's monsters lose 100 attack and defense for each banished card. And then whenever a card is banished, you can banish a card on the field or in either player's graveyard, which adds fuel to the fire. And since Chixiao banishes cards for its negate, and Chixiao can also banish a Swordsoul or a Worm card from your graveyard to protect itself from destruction once per turn, I believe. And then I believe Cheng Ying can also do the same for the protection, which just throws fuel onto the fire. And then we're on Evil Longwan, which is just Longwan on steroids. It burns your opponent for doing game actions, which is crazy. And it burns for 1200. So this thing can help you push for lethal, which is why I mentioned the other 1-card Baron combo that you can go for with just Motorbike. But you would specifically have to draw Motorbike and not draw the Wakaushi. But even if you draw the Wakaushi, you can still make Baron. Well, no, you couldn't make Baron that way, but regardless. And that is it for the Swordsoul Synchros that we are on. Next, we're on 2 copies of Baxia, because Baxia is one of your board-breaking cards. Whenever it's Synchro Summoned, you can target cards on the field equal to the number of different attributes used for a Synchro Summon, and return them to the hand. And then it has a Reborn effect, I believe. Yeah, you can target 1 card you control in a level 4 or lower monster in your graveyard, destroy the card on the field, and if you do, special summon the monster from the graveyard. Then we have 1 copy of Yazi, Evil of the Yang Zing, because he is also a Reborn effect that has a floating effect. whenever he blows himself up, because you summon him, blow himself up, then he summons one from your graveyard. That's why Yazi's in here. And then the boy that I've been alluding to this whole time, he used to be one band boy because Lithosadrum in Dinos was broken as shit. And that is the one copy of Dang Long, because you can only play one copy of Dang Long, but even at that, you only really need the one copy. So what does Dang Long do? He does everything. He does everything you need. On summon, he searches a Yang Zing card, any Yang Zing card. He can send a worm monster from your deck to the graveyard to change his level to the sent monsters. So he sets up any of your Tenyis in the graveyard. He puts a Swordsoul in the graveyard. He puts, whatever you want in the graveyard for whatever use later on down the line. And then whenever he leaves the field by any means, you summon a Yang Zing from the deck. And he's a tuner. He's a tuner that self-modulates levels by foolishing from deck. It's crazy. And then I'm also on one copy of Chao Feng. Chao Feng is easily cuttable as well. You don't need to play it. I'm just playing it as like a neat little spicy tech because being able to make it unaffected by whatever attribute or by light or dark, which is another reason why you run the Chi Wen and Jiao Tu, because you can use them to make Chao Feng. But in testing, I have not had Chao Feng come up. And then moving onward, we have one copy of Adamancipator Risen Dragite. This is why the Shitsana comes up a lot, is because this is a spell trap negate, but you have to have a water monster in your graveyard specifically for its spell trap negate to be live. So this card is good, but it specifically needs a water, which Moye is a water too. So you're running 4 monsters in the deck that make this thing live, and three out of the 4 are a 1-card combo to make, a Chi Xiao plus the next card, Baron de Fleur, who is now dirt cheap. This deck is dirt cheap because Danglong was like $2. You can make this exact list for really cheap. I want to say you could probably make this list for about $75-$80, but that's because the Swordsoul cards themselves are up in price a little bit. So yeah, I'm on one copy of Baron because you have to play Baron in Swordsoul. It's iconic at this point. And then another one of the changes I've made between my list and the list that I am taking inspiration from is I'm on 3 copies of Monk of the Tenyi, when the guy I got inspiration from was on 2 Monk, and he wasn't on Shaman, which I am on Shaman of the Tenyi as well, which Shaman of the Tenyi lets you discard a card to Monster Reborn a worm monster, and that's really all I use it for ever, and that's the only effect on it that it has been relevant for me. But Shaman doesn't really come up in testing. So if you were to decide to play Pot of Prosperity in here for whatever reason, Shaman is a good option. Well, you can't get away with that, but regardless, banishing Shaman, a Monk, and maybe 1 copy of Baxia is a relatively okay idea. Now we're going to move on to the side deck, because I have a fully constructed side deck for this deck, and we're going to get right on into it. Starting us off, we have that 3rd copy of Taya, because a 3rd Taya does come up. There have been times in testing where I'm like, I could really use a 3rd Taya, or I need to draw a Taya, and with only 2 Taya, I'm less likely to draw 1 than I would be if I had 3 Taya and I needed to draw 1. And then the card that I said you could replace for another copy of Blackout is Swordsoul Punishment. This card is a little niche. Like I said, you could completely make this a second copy of Punishment, you could make this a second copy of Blackout, but I opted for the Punishment just because having extra variety to me sounded better than playing a second copy of a card that you search during your combo and is really only useful on that first turn anyways. And even at that, Blackout isn't that great. against Unchained, which is why we play other forms of interaction. Then we have 3 copies of Droll and Lockbird, because Droll is really good still, especially because, like I said, we're in a combo format, so Droll is going to be really good. He's going to be one of your best friends. Then we're also on 3 copies of Dark Ruler No More, because Dark Ruler, again, into a combo format is fairly good, especially boarding this and going second. You can bait out a negate with Motorbike and do whatever, and then you can also fire off the Dark Ruler. I'm also on 1 copy of Herald of the Abyss for the Pearly matchup. I don't see Pearly being that great right now, mainly because I feel like sitting on a towers is not good enough anymore, and people are outing it. Plus, Red Dragon Archfiend makes monsters that are just simply bigger, so they deal with Pearly. And Red Dragon Archfiend is a fairly good deck right now. And then I'm on 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence and 3 copies of Evenly Matched to pair with our 3 copies of Dark Ruler, because if you don't open the Superheavy Samurai combo, you can always go Dark Ruler into Evenly into Normal Summon Moye, and then combo from there. And give me just a quick little second to reorganize everything, and I will be right back with y'all. Oh, phone? Oh, well, never mind. My phone's being a wackadoodle and not letting me, pause the recording. So, I'm going to just show y'all that I am... No, I won't show y'all that I'm a cheapskate. My PlayStation just turned itself on. I don't know why, and that's kind of terrifying. I'm going to be a cheapskate with the Swordsoul cards, though. Just going to put my 3 Moye on top of everything, because I'm probably going to shuffle this up after the fact. And like I said, with that being said, I will see everybody in the I'll see everybody whenever I'm back from vacation on how it will most likely be the next video. So with that, peace out. Come on, phone. Hang on.